Get ready to dive into the story of a man who turned bodybuilding into both an art form and a way of life. A legendary athlete, nicknamed the Black Panther, who stunned the world with his flawless aesthetics and commanding presence. But his journey goes far beyond the stage. It's a story packed with challenges, controversies, faith, and unshakable determination. Every chapter of his life holds inspiration for anyone who believes in the power of both body and mind. So you know the drill. Grab your pre-workout and come along, because this ride will show you why he's still one of the greatest icons in bodybuilding history. Serge Nubret, known worldwide as the legendary Black Panther, was born on October 6, 1938, in Anse-Bertrand, a small town on the island of Guadeloupe in the French Caribbean. From an early age, he carried an imposing aura, something people noticed long before he ever set foot on a bodybuilding stage. His name would echo through decades as a symbol of aesthetics, discipline, and passion for the human body. But who exactly was this man who earned respect both inside and outside the competitive arena? To understand his path, we need to rewind to his childhood. Serge lived in Guadeloupe until he was 12, in a community shaped by a laid-back lifestyle, surrounded by ocean and lush nature. He was an active kid, spending most of his time outdoors, naturally building a kind of vitality that later became his trademark. That carefree environment shaped, almost without him realizing it, the foundation for a gifted physique. In 1950, the Nubret family took a sharp turn in life. They moved to Paris, chasing better opportunities and a stronger education for Serge. Imagine the contrast, leaving a Caribbean island to dive headfirst into the hustle and bustle of the French capital. It was in this new setting that Serge realized he wasn't just another student. In any physical activity, he stood out with ease, as if his body had been designed for sports. During his teenage years, Serge started reflecting on what he called his reason for being. More than physical strength, there was a deep spiritual conviction in him that the path of sports wasn't just a choice, it was destiny. Years later, he would expand on this idea in his book I Am, Me and God, where he described bodybuilding as a purpose entrusted to him by something greater. For Serge, it was never just about muscle. It was about fulfilling a calling. In 1958, at age 20, Serge returned to Guadeloupe. That decision wasn't random. He wanted to avoid being drafted into the Algerian War. But that return became a turning point. It was then that he discovered weight training, and almost instantly, it stopped being just physical exercise and became the center of his life. As he put it himself, he hadn't just found a sport, he'd found a way of living. That encounter with the iron lit a fire in Serge that never went out. In no time, he realized he had rare genetics, an incredible ability to build muscle, and above all, an extraordinary determination. Bodybuilding became his greatest passion, something he didn't just practice, but lived and breathed daily. Every workout felt like another step toward the destiny he believed had been handed down to him by God. And so began the story of a young man who, through life's twists and the hardships of his era, found in bodybuilding not only the strength to reshape his body, but also the deeper meaning of his existence. Serge's life took an impressive turn in 1958 when he walked into a gym for the very first time. Picture this. After just 3 months of training, he was already ready for the stage. The result? He won the title of Mr. Guadeloupe. And he didn't stop there. The following year, he did it again, proving he wasn't just some fleeting talent, but someone destined to become a legend. That early victory was only the beginning. In 1960, Serge went beyond the local scene and traveled to Montreal for the IFBB World Championship. There, standing among the world's best athletes, the young Caribbean competitor shocked everyone by being crowned the most muscular man in the world. For a rookie, this was almost unthinkable, and for Serge, it was the confirmation that bodybuilding truly was his life's purpose. His victory in Montreal didn't just earn him international recognition, it opened doors to countless opportunities. The fitness press raved about his dense, symmetrical, and aesthetic physique. He began to stand out as a different kind of competitor, one who combined classic proportions with a captivating stage presence. It was the birth of his image as the feared Black Panther. The impact was so strong that Serge quickly started getting invited to appear in European films. His build and charisma caught the attention of directors, and soon enough he was starring in productions across France and Italy. His body wasn't just an athletic sculpture anymore. It had become his passport into the entertainment world. That meteoric start in bodybuilding revealed something that would define Serge's entire career: his ability to reinvent himself and shine no matter where he was. In just 2 years, he went from a tiny Caribbean island to becoming a global reference, not only in sports, but also on the big screen. And the crazy part? He was only getting started. More than medals and trophies, what really stood out was his mindset. Serge never looked at bodybuilding as just a sport. For him, it was a spiritual calling, a path laid out for his life. That conviction gave him unshakable confidence, something you could see every time he stepped on stage, hit the gym, or even stood in front of a movie camera. The kid who once discovered the weights back in Guadeloupe had now become a name echoing across the world. Serge Nubret built a bodybuilding career that lasted an incredible 25 years. During that time, he competed in the biggest federations in the world: IFBB, NABA, WBBG, and WABA. Very few athletes had both the guts and consistency to stay at the top for that long. And that's what made him an icon. He wasn't just a competitor. He was someone who broke molds and commanded any stage he stepped on. Among his greatest achievements were titles that secured his place among the best in history: Mr. Europe in 1970, the prestigious NABA Mr. Universe in 1976, and a double victory at the WBBG in 1977, where he won both Mr. World and Mr. Olympus. And he didn't stop there. He came back to the stage to be crowned WABA World Champion in 1981 and again in 1983, proof of his remarkable longevity as an athlete. But maybe the most talked about moments of his career were his appearances at Mr. Olympia, the Super Bowl of bodybuilding. Serge placed third in both 1972 and 1973, results that already showed his consistency among the elite. What impressed people most was the combination of his physique and his demeanor. He wasn't just about size. His body was the perfect mix of muscle density, symmetry, and proportions that many still consider the gold standard of an ideal physique. It was as if each muscle had been sculpted to perfection, giving him a presence that captivated both audiences and judges. And here's a detail that cements his greatness even more. Serge was the only bodybuilder in history to win 6 world titles across 4 different federations. That speaks not only to his versatility, but also his independence. He didn't confine himself to one organization or one set of standards. He sought recognition wherever fairness and opportunity existed. That long career also turned him into a role model for countless other athletes. While many bodybuilders burned out in cycles of highs and lows, Serge stayed disciplined through the decades. He wasn't a moment guy, he was an ambassador of the sport, embodying its true essence. Then came 1975, one of the most controversial years in bodybuilding history, and Serge was right at the center of it. That year's Mr. Olympia had special meaning. It was supposed to be Arnold Schwarzenegger's farewell. Arnold had already won 5 titles in a row, and the expectation was that he'd close out with the 6th, ending his competitive career in grand style. But there was one big obstacle to that perfect storyline: the imposing figure of Serge Nubret. At the time, many argued that Serge was more aesthetic, more defined, and even more commanding than Arnold himself. His symmetry, razor-thin waist, and thick, balanced muscle density were at their peak, and the idea of him toppling the Austrian oak wasn't some wild fantasy. It was a real threat. Behind the scenes, the buzz was clear. If Nubret showed up in top shape, Arnold's throne could be in jeopardy. And then came the scandal. Just 2 weeks before the contest, the IFBB announced Serge was suspended. The reason? Alleged involvement in an adult film, something the federation claimed didn't fit the image they wanted to portray. Nubret fiercely denied the accusations, but the decision was already final. The shock hit him hard. He stopped training altogether and even stopped eating properly. Imagine the frustration. After months of brutal prep, endless workouts, and a strict diet, Serge saw his dream ripped away for a reason still surrounded by controversy. Over the next 12 days, he lost weight, muscle mass, and, worst of all, his motivation. Many believe this was a calculated move to make sure Arnold wouldn't be beaten in his farewell Olympia. On the eve of the contest, the federation backtracked and allowed Serge to compete. But the damage was already done. He stepped on stage far from the condition he had reached just days earlier. Even so, his quality was undeniable. good enough to take second place, beating Lou Ferrigno but finishing behind Arnold. For a lot of fans and insiders, the result didn't truly reflect what that showdown could have been. The episode left deep scars. Serge felt betrayed by the federation he had given years of service to, even holding the role of European vice president. From that moment on, his relationship with the IFBB would never be the same. Not long after, he officially broke ties and founded the WABA, the World Amateur Bodybuilding Association, an organization created to bring more fairness and opportunities to athletes. That controversy didn't just expose the shady politics of bodybuilding at the time. It also cemented Serge Nubret's image as a man of principle, someone who wouldn't bend to political games. And while he was conquering the bodybuilding stage, Serge was also making waves on the silver screen. Over his lifetime, he appeared in around 25 film and TV productions, bringing his imposing physique and magnetic presence to audiences far beyond the gym. That crossover wasn't random. Directors in Europe noticed his build and charisma early in his career and knew he was perfect for strong, heroic roles. One of his first big roles came in Les Titans, 1962, a classic of the Italian epic genre. Serge played a warrior, showing just how naturally his look fit into roles demanding strength, heroism, and physical dominance. It was the beginning of an artistic journey that ran side by side with his sports career. Another standout was his role in César and Rosalie, 1972, directed by Claude Sautet and starring none other than Yves Montand. Serge played a scrap metal buyer, a small part, but one that gave him visibility in a prestigious French production. It proved he could move between action roles and subtler parts without losing his screen presence. In the 1980s, he shined again, this time on TV. He played Ciceau Le Marchand in the French miniseries Petit Déjeuner Compris. What made it fascinating was that the role mirrored his real life, a bodybuilder who owned a gym in Paris. The authenticity he brought to the character resonated with viewers, making it one of his most memorable appearances outside bodybuilding. In 1981, Serge appeared in Le Professionnel, one of Georges Lautner's most famous films, alongside the legendary Jean-Paul Belmondo. Though his role was brief, being part of such a celebrated production elevated his status as an actor. His presence, even in quick scenes, was impossible to miss. He always carried that aura of power. And of course, we can't skip his appearance in Pumping Iron, 1977, the groundbreaking documentary that forever changed how the world saw bodybuilding. Serge's screen time was limited due to contract issues, but just being seen alongside Arnold Schwarzenegger and Lou Ferrigno was enough to etch him into golden era history. Just like on stage, Serge brought something to cinema that went far beyond physical appearance. He radiated a unique energy, a mix of discipline, confidence, and magnetism that drew people in. And when you talk about Serge Nubret, you can't ignore his unique training philosophy, famously called the Nubret method. At a time when many bodybuilders swore by short sessions with insanely heavy weights, Serge went the opposite way. He built his physique with ultra-high volume, endless reps, and almost unbelievable discipline. We're talking about something that sounds insane to most athletes, 30 to 50 sets per muscle group, except for arms, where he did just 16 sets. Each set had 12 to 20 reps, with only 30 seconds of rest between them. His workouts turned into true marathons of muscular endurance, lasting up to 5 hours a day, 6 days a week. But the real secret wasn't just the volume. Serge believed the pump, that swollen, blood-filled muscle feeling, was everything. For him, it wasn't about how much weight you could move, but how well you could feel the muscle working. The mind-muscle connection was the heart of his philosophy. Every rep had to be conscious, every contraction had to be felt, almost like a meditative process. One of the most jaw-dropping aspects of Serge's routine was his work. Every single morning, he would start the day with countless sets of crunches, one after another. That extreme habit gave him one of the smallest and most impressive waistlines in bodybuilding history, a trademark that set him apart. While many athletes were obsessed with sheer size and mass, Serge was fixated on aesthetics and proportion, believing that true bodybuilding was the art of sculpting a balanced physique. But his philosophy went way beyond the physical. Serge saw training as a way to unify mind, body, and spirit. He often said bodybuilding wasn't just about lifting weights. It was a spiritual and emotional experience. Each workout was also a moment of introspection, a meeting with his own essence, and a step toward fulfilling his life's purpose. This style, while nearly impossible for most people to maintain, delivered incredible results. Even decades after his peak, Serge still displayed a jaw-dropping physique, proving that his method worked if you had the discipline and willpower. He became living proof that in bodybuilding, there's more than one path to excellence. The so-called Nubret method went on to inspire generations of athletes and is still remembered as one of the most extreme training systems ever created. If Serge's workouts were legendary, his diet was just as fascinating. Instead of following rigid protocols like many bodybuilders of his time, Serge preferred to listen to his body. His meals were built around simple, natural foods: red meat, rice, beans, lentils, chicken, fish, and fruit. No miracle formulas, no unnecessary complications, just real food, prepared in a basic, nutritious way. One detail that really stands out is the insane amount of meat he ate. When prepping for contests, Serge would consume between 4 to 6 pounds of meat per day. That's about 2 to 3 kilos, often beef, and, in some periods, even horse meat. He believed animal protein was essential for muscle growth and saw no reason to chase complicated alternatives. Another curiosity, Serge didn't split his diet into 6 or 7 small meals like most bodybuilders. Instead, he ate just 2 or 3 big meals a day, convinced it was the most natural and efficient way for the body to function. This approach went against the grain of bodybuilding nutrition at the time, but it worked for him astonishingly well. His philosophy was simple: the body is wise and tells you what it needs. If he was hungry, he ate a lot. If not, he didn't force it. For Nubret, it wasn't about hitting exact numbers or sticking to a calorie spreadsheet. It was about listening to your body and respecting its signals. When it came to supplements, his view was also unusual for the era. Serge avoided relying on powders or excessive formulas, trusting almost entirely in whole foods. Even at a time when many athletes were turning to concentrated shakes, he kept things clean and natural, proudly saying, "The muscles I built came from food, not from powder." This approach to nutrition showed that Serge didn't see bodybuilding as an exact science, but as an instinctive art. He believed every body was unique, and the best way to achieve results was to observe yourself and adapt to your own responses. In the end, his diet reflected the same philosophy that guided his training. Bodybuilding wasn't just about looks. It was about harmony between body, mind, and spirit. Food wasn't just fuel. It was part of a greater process of balance, discipline, and self-knowledge. A lifestyle that still inspires people today, not only those chasing muscle, but anyone seeking a more conscious relationship with their body. Behind the imposing image of the Black Panther, there was also a family man. Serge Nubret was the father of 4 children: Pascal, Stanley, Corinne, and Grace. Each represented a piece of his personal story, a more intimate side that was often hidden behind the public figure of the champion. His second wife, Jacqueline, was also connected to bodybuilding, even winning titles of her own, making their relationship even more special. That family side showed Serge wasn't just an athlete obsessed with his physique. He was also a man who wanted to pass on values and teach by example. He often said the discipline he applied to bodybuilding carried over into his role as a father. For him, weight training mirrored life itself: dedication, patience, and consistency. Principles he lived at home just as much as on stage. But perhaps the deepest part of his life was his spirituality. In 2006, at 68 years old, Serge published Je suis, moi et Dieu, I am, me and God. More than an autobiography, the book was a window into his most intimate reflections. It wasn't just about his athletic career. It explored his thoughts on God, life, and humanity's place in the world. For Serge, bodybuilding wasn't just a sport or a profession. It was a divine calling. He believed God had mapped out his path as an athlete, and that every workout, every victory, and even every hardship was part of a greater mission. This conviction gave him the strength to endure injustice and move forward with dignity. That spirituality shaped how he saw his own body. Muscles weren't just aesthetics. They were a way of honoring the Creator. Training was, in his eyes, an act of faith, a way to show gratitude for the life he had been given. This perspective set him apart from many of his peers, who often saw only the glory of trophies. Serge also spoke often about the tension between destiny and free will. In his reflections, he believed God had outlined a path, but it was up to each person to choose to walk it or not. In his case, he felt he had accepted that mission and dedicated himself to fulfilling it as best as he could. It was a philosophy that inspired not only athletes, but everyday people as well. The final years of Serge Nubret's life were marked by a somber and mysterious chapter. In March 2009, at the age of 70, he was found unconscious in his home, the victim of pancreatic failure that led to a massive stroke. The bodybuilder who had spent his life radiating vitality and discipline suddenly faced a battle for survival. The news spread quickly through the bodybuilding world, and with it came countless rumors. Some speculated that Serge might have been poisoned, a theory that gained traction in magazines and forums at the time. His family, however, always denied such claims, insisting the cause was strictly medical. Still, the mystery lingers among fans and admirers to this day. The coma he fell into wasn't brief. Serge remained in that state for months, fighting silently under medical care. For those who had followed his career, it was heartbreaking to see such a powerful, seemingly indestructible man face such severe fragility. It was as if life was testing his resilience one last time. Only now, muscles and discipline couldn't help him. Even after coming out of the coma, his health never fully recovered. He remained in a fragile state, far from the stage, far from the gym, and far from the routine that had defined him for decades. For many fans, it was a time of silence, where only memories of his greatness remained, along with the hope of a recovery that, sadly, never came. On April 19, 2011, the bodybuilding world was shaken. Serge Nubret had passed away at 72 years old in Pierrefitte-sur-Seine, France. His death marked the end of an era, but also the certainty that his legacy would live on in the memory of everyone inspired by his story. His body was cremated at the iconic Père-Lachaise Cemetery in Paris, resting place of some of the greatest cultural figures in history. It was there that the Black Panther found his final home, surrounded by respect and admiration, not just as an athlete, but as a man who left a mark on generations. When we think of Serge Nubret, it's impossible not to picture one of the most aesthetic and symmetrical physiques of bodybuilding's golden era. His razor-thin waist, perfect proportions, and dense, sculpted muscles placed him on a level that even today serves as a benchmark of athletic beauty. He wasn't just strength, he was living proof that bodybuilding could also be art. His influence stretched across generations. Athletes of the past and present continue to draw inspiration from his training philosophy, built around high volume, the relentless chase for the pump, and the deep connection between body, mind, and spirit. Even today, many bodybuilders try to replicate his methods in search of not only size, but also the crisp definition and timeless aesthetics that were his trademark. Recognition for his impact came both during his life and long after. In 2024, for example, his homeland of Guadeloupe paid a special tribute to its most famous son, inaugurating a weightlifting hall that bears his name. A way of making eternal on the island what the whole world had already acknowledged. Serge Nubret wasn't just an athlete. He was a cultural treasure of the sport. Beyond bodybuilding, he also left his mark as an actor, federation leader, and thinker. His voice carried into many fields, and his image still graces magazine covers, books, and gym murals as a symbol of what's most inspiring in bodybuilding. Serge's legacy isn't just about victories. It's about the philosophy he shared, discipline, faith, authenticity, and the courage to walk his own path, even in the face of enormous obstacles. The Black Panther never bowed to the system, and that's why his story continues to live on. Today, when we remember Serge Nubret, we're not just talking about a bodybuilder, we're remembering an eternal icon, someone who elevated the sport to an artistic and spiritual dimension. His image, carved with sweat and purpose, remains a reference point for all who believe bodybuilding is more than just muscle. It's identity, passion, and a way of life. So, did you already know the story of bodybuilding's Black Panther? Which part of Serge Nubret's journey impressed you most? His titles, his unique training philosophy, or his spiritual outlook on the sport? Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. If this video inspired you, don't forget to hit the like button and help spread this incredible story. And if you want to support us even more, consider becoming a channel member so we can keep bringing you top-quality content about the greatest legends of bodybuilding. Oh, and one last thing. Make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell, because we've still got plenty more epic stories about the giants who shaped the sport we all love. And since you've made it this far, don't leave without watching the next video popping up on your screen. I'm sure you'll enjoy it just as much as this one.